What's up, guys? This is Jensen, and welcome to another video. So I know it's only May 5th, but in my opinion, it's never too early to get that head start on fantasy football. If you want to edge out your friends, you got to do your preparation months in advance. So I got you covered looking at the rookies here. I'm going to take a look at the projected top rookies at each position in terms of fantasy points. And there are going to be some productive players. There's always productive players in terms of rookies. So definitely got to study on those guys and get those guys on your team. Obviously, at quarterback, Joe Burrow is the obvious choice here. And I expect him to be a borderline top 10 producer in terms of quarterbacks this year. The dude is going to be an immediate producer, especially because he had a ton of production at LSU. He's experienced. It's not like Trubisky where he came in with only 15 starts. Haskins coming only in with like 15 starts. Those guys are inexperienced and didn't produce. Burrow's experienced. He's going to get the ball out of his hands quickly, not really going to turn the ball over. And I believe in head coach Zac Taylor. I think that this dude, he was under Sean McVay. Surely he learned something there. And last year, I'm going to give him a pass for what happened last year. When you have Andy Dalton and Ryan Finley as your quarterbacks, I mean, I can't really blame you for being that terrible. So I think that Zac Taylor's a good head coach. Mixon's going to help Burrow out in terms of being a consistent runner. And I really do think that his receiving core is stacked. These dudes are playmakers. AJ Green, John Ross, Tyler Boyd, and T. Higgins. I mean, that's an embarrassment of riches right there. Burrow's throwing to those dudes. Even though the offensive line isn't that great, I expect Burrow to be great. And I do think that this is a dude that you should be picking up in the late rounds of your draft. And I think that's a much better value than picking a guy like Lamar Jackson in the second round or something like that. Don't make that mistake. You pick Burrow in the late rounds, you won't be disappointed in my opinion. And at running back, I think that the guy is going to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire simply because of production and volume. I don't think that he's the best running back in this draft class, I'm not going to lie. I thought he was the fourth best running back, but the top three guys ahead of him got stuck in committees when we're looking at DeAndre Swift and Kerryon Johnson in Detroit. We're looking at Marlon Mack and Jonathan Taylor in Indianapolis. And where we're looking at Mark Ingram, don't forget Lamar Jackson too. And also J.K. Dobbins, he's stuck there in Baltimore. So I think that Edwards-Helaire, obviously he's in that high-powered Chiefs offense, so surely he's going to put up a ton of points. Damian Williams, with respect to him, he's going to get some carries, but he's not that big of a threat. Edwards-Helaire is going to produce in terms of receptions as well. He's a dynamic runner, and especially the reception part. In a PPR league, we know how important that is. So I think Edwards-Helaire is a guy. You don't really want to be drafting him too early, but at the right rounds, maybe around 6 or 7, he's a good steal in my opinion. But I think the sleeper is going to be Keyshawn Vaughn, the running back who got drafted to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, simply because I don't believe in Ronald Jones. I think that he's pretty terrible. Honestly, this dude was losing carries to Peyton Barber last year, so I don't see a reason why Keyshawn Vaughn shouldn't step in there and become the guy who gets a majority of the carries. I think he can produce somewhat in the reception game. He had 28 receptions last year at Vanderbilt. And I'm not going to lie, I don't think he's that great of a running back, but if you could get him in the later rounds, you won't be disappointed because I think this dude could be a guy who gets 10 to 15 carries a game in that Tom Brady high-powered Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. If you get Keyshawn Vaughn in the late rounds, you're not going to be disappointed. And looking at the wide receivers, obviously it's a stacked wide receiver class, but I think that Jerry Jeudy is a guy who's going to be the most productive of this crew simply because of that Denver offense. When we're looking at that Denver offense, me personally, I'm a huge believer in Drew Lock. That's a guy you should pick up in the late rounds at quarterback because he has a ton of weapons. I really do believe in him. And when we're looking at the weapons he has, Judy's going to get a lot of one-on-one looks in my opinion because when we're looking at a guy like Cortland Sutton, when you're working with a guy like that, you're not going to be able to double-team Jeudy. Noah Fant at tight end, I really do think he's going to take a step up. He's another guy worth drafting in terms of the Denver offense. And with Phillip Lindsay and Melvin Gordon creating a dynamic duo at running back, I do think that Jeudy, he's going to be a very productive player. He's a good route runner. I think that Jeudy could be a guy who gets over 1,000 yards this season. That's a guy you want on your fantasy team, in my opinion. But the sleeper is Denzel Mims. I don't know if he counts as a sleeper because he was drafted in the second round. But in terms of fantasy, this is a dude who's probably going to be available in the late rounds. But you might want to draft him. It might be in your best interest because when we're talking about the Jets offense, looking at that wide receiver core they have right now, not that impressive, not going to lie. Denzel Mims is the clear number one choice. If you believe in Sam Darnold to take a step forward this year, then I think that even in an Adam Gase offense, and we know he clearly isn't the smartest of head coaches or the most brilliant of offensive minds, I think that Mims will still find a way to produce. And he's definitely worth a flyer in the late rounds for sure in 10 to 12 team leagues. I think that Mims is a sleeper. And when we look at tight ends, honestly, you shouldn't really be drafting a tight end unless you're in a really deep league. But Cole Kmet's the guy. Assuming that Nick Foles starts for Chicago, we saw Foles in Philadelphia turn Ertz, obviously. He used Ertz a lot, and Ertz became very valuable, obviously. And I do think that the same thing could happen with Kmet, because I don't think that Jimmy Graham is that big of a threat. Kmet, some compare him to Rob Gronkowski, and rightfully so. This dude, he seems to be a physical monster, honestly. And I do think that with Nick Foles at quarterback, I think that Cole Kmet could be a guy where if you draft him in the late rounds, you might not be disappointed, because I think this dude is going to produce right out of the gate. I think that if Foles plays well this year, which I think he will, Kmet could be a guy who's top 10 in terms of tight ends. And especially for a position that we all know is pretty thin year in and year out. You get a guy like Kmet in the final rounds, you're not going to be disappointed. The sleeper is going to be Devin Asiasi, tight end for the New England Patriots. He got drafted there, obviously, in the 3rd round. And a lot of people say this is a home run pick. The dude is very physically talented. And especially when you have a young quarterback like Jarrett Stidham there, we normally see these young quarterbacks that depend on the tight ends. I think that if Asiasi becomes the number 1 tight end there, which I think he will, Dalton Keene is a little raw. So I think if Asiasi is the number 1 tight end there, that's a dude who could be in the top 10 potentially in terms of tight ends. I'm not sure about Jarrett Stidham, how good he's going to be, but I think that Asiasi is certainly a guy that could be very productive. I'm not going to get into kickers. They're just way too random. We don't know what's going to happen. But I will say that in terms of defense, even though you can't draft singular defensive players, the Washington defense is definitely worth a look. I think that because they drafted Chase Young, that makes them a potential top 10 defense when we're looking at that defensive line with Jonathan Allen and Montez Sweat at that making up that defensive line. When we're looking at Landon Collins at safety, that defensive line is going to be monstrous, guys. There's going to be a ton of pass rush there. And I do think that this is a team that, even though they might not be that great in terms of record, they could certainly help out your fantasy team on defense. That could be a top 10 defense. So I think Washington's a defensive pickup. And that concludes the video. Obviously, there are a ton of other sleepers out there, and you definitely got to be prepared and pick the right guys. But if you get the rookies right, there's a good chance you'll win your fantasy league. Anyways, remember to follow me on Twitter, Jensen Sports. See y'all later.